We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. And thing sucks.
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet.
Well,
Yeah, we here now. Stupid.
It has been an absolutely crazy week. And there's just all kinds of news to cover. So I say this all the time, but I try to at least go into the weeds on some stuff that maybe other channels aren't covering. So I've got some pretty deep news coverage for you today. And it kind of all started with, I woke up this morning. I have a really good friend he and I have been friends for like 20 years, and he's very right-leaning. He's very conservative. He's a Trump voter. So we've always argued, and I've always played the role of the liberal, and he's always played, the role of the right-wing guy. And as time has progressed, he used to send me articles by Pat Buchanan and stuff all the time. And I always just thought, oh, Pat Buchanan is just a racist and whatever. Nowadays, I'm kind of like, maybe Pat Buchanan had some points, because I see how every person who, like, every kind of like thought leader from the right gets smeared as a racist. Ron Paul, it happened to Ron Paul. I don't know if you remember this. If you were paying attention back in the 2012 cycle, they did this to Ron Paul. As soon as he became a legitimate threat, they're like, he's a white supremacist. He has ties to white power groups and so on and so forth. So anyway, this morning I woke up to my friend sending me this article about how George Soros is funding the pro-Palestinian college protests, which is complete and utter nonsense. But like everything, I mean, I relate it to the pharma thing, right? Like with COVID, they take these little facts or these little pieces of data and they spin them and scrutinize them and kind of warp them in a way that makes their point. And I'm going to show you, we're going to go into the weeds on why this is bullshit. And it's really, I wanted to say depressing, but not depressing, I guess typical, to see the immediate forsaking of their values by these free speech conservatives as soon as the free speech is something that they don't like. When it comes to, these pro-Palestine protests on campuses, all of a sudden they're like, we need safe spaces. We need to shut everyone down. These people are terrorists and racists. And so many people have made this point, but I think it's such a valid one, is that, all these same people for the last 10 or 15 years have been calling college campuses and college professors and college students the most woke, the most, ridiculously woke snowflakes who want safe spaces for everything. And now we're supposed to believe that those same people are all racists who hate Jewish people. Come on. How stupid do you have to be to sap this stuff up? So I just wanted to, I had an incident with, I don't know if you've ever heard of Lori Spencer, who, if anyone sees this or anyone related to Lori sees this, I think Lori's awesome. I'm a big fan of hers and I follow her on Twitter. She's a big RFK backer. We disagree on a lot of stuff. She had a post the other day about how Biden is the most pro-Hamas president or the most anti-Israel president in history. And I'm just like, are you that fucking stupid? I mean, look around at what's going on and repeat that sentence. Biden is the most anti-Israel president in history. And so she said, yeah, he betrayed Israel in the 80s or whatever. And I'm like, okay, here's a video. There's someone put out a tweet, and I've shared this multiple times, and I didn't dig it up for this, but I played it on a previous stream, of Biden saying, if there was not an Israel, we would have to invent one to protect our interests in the region. So I was like, hey, Lori, this is the Biden I know from that era. Do you have proof that he said something anti-Israel? And I got no response. So that's really what it breaks down to for me with all this kind of stuff is, what's your proof, right? Because if your proof is, oh, someone said this, that's not proof. And we're going to get into this a little bit with Rogan in a little while, because, wow, as much as I love Joe Rogan, he is just, he has some takes that I'm like, Joe, come on, man. There's no evidence for this. 1 minute he's questioning the moon landing. The next minute he's saying that China and Russia have infiltrated our colleges and control the dialogue in America. And it's really stupid.
ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL.
Kanye, way ahead of the curve on that. So anyway, let's dive into it. Hopefully my mic is working today. I went through my checklist of stuff today and made sure it was, but if it's not, please tell me in the chat. And let's get moving. So I wanted to start, like I said, with this piece about Soros funding college protests. Now, this is the article my friend sent me this morning. Pro-Palestinian protesters are backed by a surprising source, Biden's biggest donor. Now, the subheadline kind of gives this away, but we're going to go into it. Some of the more outspoken groups against Biden and Israel get funding from foundations attached to some of the largest names in Democratic circles. That is the actual headline right there, because that makes it way more distant. The headline makes it seem like George Soros is funding the protests, but the subheadline is like, there are Democratic donors attached to organizations, which when you're a donor and you're one of these organizations, you get funding from all kinds of places and you do all kinds of different things. So these fucking donors, these guys who just throw money at stuff like Bill Gates, for example, a lot of times I don't think they know the details of what they're doing. But I think this article has a different purpose than it seems, and I'll explain that in a minute. So here's the first. Here, let me get this big for you so you can read along if you want. President Joe Biden has been dogged for months by pro-Palestinian protesters calling him Genocide Joe, but some of the groups behind the demonstrations receive financial backing from philanthropists pushing hard for his re-election. Okay, no lies detected there. The donors include some of the biggest names in Democratic circles: Gates, Soros, Rockefeller, and Pritzker, according to a Politico analysis. Now, all my conservative friends have been puppeting the whole like, oh, Soros is funding the protests. Soros controls everything I don't like. It's deeper than that, guys. Unfortunately for you, it's a lot more nuanced than Soros controls everything. So two of the main organizers behind protests at Columbia University and on other campuses are Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now. Both are supported by the Tides Foundation, which is seeded by Democratic mega donor George Soros. So Soros doesn't support either of these organizations directly. He supports the Tides Foundation, which gave them money at some point. Now, conservatives will be like, oh, Soros is giving money to the people standing at colleges with Palestinian flags. No, that is not happening. As you can see, it's much more complicated than that. He gave money to an organization that gave money to an organization that's involved in the protests. Jewish Voice for Peace didn't even organize the protests. Glenn Greenwald talked to college students who actually organized the protests. Now, Jewish Voice for Peace supports the protests, but I'm going to explain to you in just a minute the motive of this article because it's fucking ridiculous. Anyway, to keep going, both are supported by the Tides Foundation, which is seeded by Democratic mega donor George Soros, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and in turn supports numerous small nonprofits that work for social change. There you go. That's the reality of this. They're not funding the protests. They're funding organizations that are in support of the protests. These organizations didn't even organize the fucking protests. You simpletons. Okay, so let's keep going. Let me make sure. Yeah, okay. So another notable Democratic donor whose philanthropy has helped the protest movement is David Rockefeller Jr., who sits on the board of the Rockefeller Brothers Fund. In 2022, the fund gave $300,000 to the Tides Foundation, according to nonprofit tax forms. Tides has given nearly $500,000 over the past 5 years to Jewish Voice for Peace, which explicitly describes itself as anti-Zionist. Okay. Several other groups involved in pro-Palestinian protests are backed by a foundation funded by Susan and Nick Pritzker, heir to the Hyatt Hotel empire, and supporters of Biden and numerous Democratic campaigns, including 6,600 to the Biden Victory Fund a few months ago, and more than 300,000 during the 2020 campaign. So that's an interesting little tidbit there. The people who own the Hyatt Foundation are supporting the Biden Victory Fund. Act accordingly, I guess. The trail of donations shows a series of blurred lines when it comes to liberal causes and democratic politics. No, not really. It just shows that. Okay, so let me give you my take on, before we go any further, let me give you my take on what this article is. This article is designed to get funding pulled from these organizations. And as we continue to read it, you'll see that. But as I read this, I'm like, okay, these guys are clearly making trumped up accusations against, the Tides Foundation and all these, just to put their donors in check, to say, hey, look, guys, you're funding anti-Semitism. So I guarantee you that what's going to happen is the Pritzker people and Gates and Soros and all these people will go, oh, stop giving money to Jewish Voice for Peace, and if not now. That's the purpose of this article, not to illustrate that Soros is funding the protest, dude. Soros! Yeah, that's what this is all about. This is about, hey, just a note to Democratic donors, you're funding these protests and you need to make sure that you're not. That's exactly what this article is. And I'm going to show you a clip later. I think it's Ken Klippenstein who said this, but he's so right. He's like, the reason the media sucks is the media doesn't work for you or me. It works for mega donors and corporations. And so this is evidence of that. This is the press going like, hey guys, funding everything. Just so you know, anti-Semitism, 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 anti-Semitism. So let's keep going. Okay, let me start over on this slide because this is good. The trail of donations shows a series of blurred lines when it comes to liberal causes and democratic politics. Often those missions are aligned, but they also sometimes have different and particularly when it comes to Gaza, conflicting agendas and tactics. And a small group of wealthy heavyweights are often playing an outsized role in funding many of them. See what I'm saying? This is like, hey guys, stop funding this. Make sure you're not giving money to these organizations. But as protester tactics have grown more intense, like taking over university buildings and shouting anti-Semitic remarks, which is not happening, as we'll get into later, the groups behind them are now attracting criticism from prominent donors on the left. That is the tell line right there. The groups behind them are now attracting criticism from prominent donors on the left. Listen to this. This is fantastic. Why is the Rockefeller Fund giving significant grants to Jewish Voice for Peace, which blamed the horrific October 7th attacks on Israel and the United States rather than Hamas? What a goddamn simpleton. Are you kidding me? It's much more complex than that, obviously. There's a whole history pre-October 7th. And this guy would never ask, like, why did October 7th happen? It's not that there's a long history of us murdering and brutalizing Palestinians or anything. It's just because they hate Jewish people. Ooh. I mean, forgive me for making these vulgar, disgusting, stupid gestures after I read these people's comments. I just can't help it because this is who these people are. And so let's keep going here. Said Elisha Weissel, a Democratic donor who chairs the Elie Wiesel Foundation, an organization that supports anti-genocide work. All right, so I took a little sidebar here. I took the liberty upon myself to take a sidebar because I went, who is Elisha Weissel? So I'm going to show you now, and you're going to love it. So let's start with this. This is an article from Jewish Insider. Elisha Weisel's next chapter. After a quarter century on Wall Street, the son of Nobel Prize winner Elie Wiesel is making plans for the next 25 years and beyond. And this is from September 2nd of 2020. I didn't clip this whole thing, but I took two really important paragraphs just to show you who this guy is. This is the first one. In another universe, Alicia Weissel might be an attorney or an Israeli citizen or a video game creator. These are among the roads not taken for the 48-year-old Weissel, who recently retired after a quarter century at Goldman Sachs. Let's just marinate on that for a minute. This guy spent a quarter century at Goldman Sachs.
No one in high school knew what the word anti-Semitic was until Ye made it popular.
But let's keep going. Alicia Weissel went on to graduate with a bachelor's degree in computer science in 1994 and would soon join Goldman Sachs. And this is like later in the article, so it's kind of an aside, but this is the paragraph I want you to really see here. But before Wall Street, Weissel had a brief stint in Israel, where he participated in a 3-month paramilitary course through Marva, Israel. We were learning how to fire an M16 and infantry maneuvers and stuff. Weissel explained, if you ended up making Aliyah, it counted towards your basic service, though, because it was considered a real basic training. I made a lot of friends. There. That would explain why he's trying to say that, all this BS about the donors. He's out there. He's the messenger for this. I made a lot of friends there. The big road not taken. I decided to come back to the States rather than stay and go with it. So that's the biggest road not taken question I think I have in my life. So anyway, that was just a quick aside to show you who the guy making these criticisms is, because, Politico is not going to mention any of that, of course. Former IDF member and Goldman Sachs executive Elie Wiesel had this to say. They didn't say that, of course. So anyway, let's keep going. Jewish Voice for Peace, which did not return a request for comment, has been a leader in disruptive protests against Biden, including shouting genocide supporter at his glitzy fundraiser in Radio City Music Hall in New York in March. Can we just applaud Jewish Voice for Peace for that? Thank you, guys. Absolutely brilliant. And, I guess this explains why you guys are the only Jewish people outside of Hasidic Jews who don't support Israel who are considered anti-Semitic. It protests on campus across the country. Its statement immediately following the October 7th attack said the source of all this violence was Israeli apartheid and occupation, and the United States complicitly in that oppression. The United States complicity in that oppression. No lies told, right? Like what? That's the anti-Semitism this former Goldman Sachs and IDF executive is trying to combat. So what I wanted to do a little bit is people think, Jewish Voice for Peace must be funded by Soros or whatever. Jewish Voice for Peace is not a new organization, okay? It's only new to the minds of simpletons because now it's involved in like real civic action and it's actually doing things. So I just wanted to show you real quick who Jewish Voice for Peace is. In February, we shared the story of Simone Zimmerman, who's one of the founders of the organization, If Not Now, which is the other organization this article mentions as funding the protests. And I'm going to show you a clip from Simone Zimmerman in a minute from one of my previous shows. But a movement of American Jews is organizing equally for equality and justice for Americans, Palestinians, and Israelis, and who served as, and by the way, this is actually from a .edu website. This is from the Hannah Avril Event Center by Politics and Humanities. So it's like it's a .edu address. I just want to make sure I get receipts on this because it's hac.bard.edu, just so you know. hac.bard.edu. This is the source of this information. So, If Not Now, Movement of American Jews. So Simone served as the national president of J Street U. Today, we're sharing a story of another U.S. peace activist, Julie Iney, who in 1996 was one of the 3 co-founders of Jewish Voice for Peace, along with Rachel Eisner and Julia Kaplan, an organization that has played a central role in the American movement for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, and which currently self-describes as the largest progressive Jewish anti-Zionist organization in the world. And this right here is why they're trying to conflate anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, because there are a lot of Jewish people who are against this. And how do you call them anti-Semites, if you make it law? So just a little bit more on Julie Iney, or Iney, hopefully I'm saying this right, was born in Los Angeles to a Mizrachi father and an Ashkenazi mother. I assume those are, what's the word, like subcategories within the Jewish religion. I know Ashkenazi is. Iney's father and family are Iraqi Jews from India, and Iney's mother's family has roots in Ukraine. Interesting. She grew up in the Hashomer Hatzar Socialist Zionist Youth Movement and attended a summer program. And at 18, a year-long program sponsored by the movement as a teenager, she also developed close relationships with Israeli cousins from her father's side. Visiting Israel with a group with a social justice mission helped Iney begin to explore the complexities of the political questions at the heart of the political struggle in Israel-Palestine. Because of Hashomer Hatzar's social justice emphasis, even if it wasn't as frank as it could have been vis-a-vis Israel, the seeds were there. We did meet with Israeli Palestinians that helped me to think critically. So that's the genesis of Jewish Voice for Peace. They're not a Soros-funded organization. They took money from an organization that takes money from Soros. So just to let you guys know, I know a lot of people don't do nuance on stuff like this, but I wanted to go into the weeds and really show you the truth behind what's going on here, because Jewish Voice for Peace is not a Soros-funded Bill Gates organization, Bill Gates-funded, Pritzker-funded organization. So let's keep going. I know this is a lot, but hopefully you're sticking with me. I assume if you're watching my stream, you're smart enough and intelligent enough to want to know these things and, want to go into the weeds. So, that's why I'm doing it. The complex funding system in the nonprofit space. So this is the thing about these articles too, is 90% of people just read the headline. And this is what I told my friend this morning who sent me this. I said, man, did you read the whole article? Because the article debunks the headline. And I feel like that's the general tone of most mainstream media articles. We're going to get into that again in a minute, and you'll see why. But let me finish this up for you anyway. The complex funding system in the nonprofit space sometimes means that groups are funded by grants or even sub-grants from a larger organization that isn't involved in granular day-to-day management of an activist group's work. In a statement to Politico, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund noted it cannot support political activity or campaigns and is not involved in the personal political giving of trustees. So right there, that kind of absolve themselves. They're like, yo, we just throw money at these trustees and they spend it. Like, it's none of our business how they spend it. Our grantees in all three portfolios support a broad range of policy ideas. Some align with the Biden administration's agenda and others conflict. This complexity is part and parcel of our nonpartisan work, said Sarah Edkins, the fund's communications director, in a statement. Interesting how that is not kind of alluded to in the headline, right? So some advisors to the left-leaning causes say that's just part of the way things work when it comes to philanthropic giving. There may be times when a donor may give an organization or candidate that sometimes does give to an organization or candidate that sometimes does something that clashes with their personal view, said Kevin Conlon, who has been a bundler for Biden as well as for Democratic presidential candidates Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and now advises nonprofits. Still, some donors say they feel conflicted as they watch the protests unfold. We're hearing from folks who want to make sure that their dollars aren't supporting people who are supporting Hamas and shouting anti-Semitic things, said Daniel Goldwyn. Again, this article is written for donors to let them know, hey, you better watch what organizations your money go to because you're getting in the way of our objectives here. It's so obvious. Public Affairs Executive Director of the Jewish United Fund in Chicago, which issues grants to small local nonprofits and to larger national nonprofits. If it's an organization they've been giving to for a long time, we encourage them to call and communicate their concerns. See, these articles, again, once you really go into the details, they kind of tell you the truth. Maybe not directly, but Biden is struggling to regain support from young people who went overwhelmingly for him in 2020. And the protests may complicate that effort. As Israel faces increasing criticism from around the world amid the high number of civilian casualties in Gaza, demonstrations in the United States are only growing more intense. Those at Columbia University in particularly have emerged as a thorn in the side of Biden, who finally weighed in on them on Thursday. And I already covered this on my last stream, but I had video of him going after Trump during BLM for, yeah, we don't forcibly send police at protesters and we respect the First Amendment. And now that he's president, of course, that thought process is out the window. He's not actually saying, this probably isn't something he wrote anyway. I'm sure someone wrote this for him. Destroying property is not a peaceful protest. It's against the law, Biden said. Vandalism, trespassing, breaking windows, shutting down campuses, forcing the cancellation of classes and graduation. None of this is a peaceful protest. Yes, and we all know that by listening to authorities and sitting down and doing what you're told, that's the type of protest that works. Just like it did in the civil rights movement and the women's suffrage movement and the gay rights movement, you know, the Stonewall riots. It's a good thing that all those gay guys just sat down and, you know, listened to, didn't try to break windows or do anything, you know, aggressive, because that's how protests should work. Some Democrats are downplaying the protest as a problem for Biden. Elections aren't determined on foreign policy issues, said Jill Zippin, co-founder of the chair of Democratic Outreach of Pennsylvania, a political action committee that works to elect Democrats in Pennsylvania. The protest movement and the encampments probably won't be an issue in November, but it's really hard to say because things can change quickly. I have a feeling if that's still going on, students will make it an issue. These kids have a lot bigger balls than the boomers want to give them credit for. So let's keep going here. The liability for Biden could be more pronounced if the protests continue throughout the summer and fall as the election draws closer. If it continues through November, then yes, it's likely to be more salient, said Omar Wasow, a scholar who studies the protest movements and their political effects. And if it somehow winds down, you'll see Americans don't care a lot about foreign policy, and it's likely not to play out in the election. Many of the nonprofits that receive grants are now involved in the protests, also have missions that are mostly unrelated to foreign policy. But as the conflict in the Middle East takes up a greater space at the center of the nation's political debates, nonprofits with other missions have been drawn to the cause. A lot of our members are supporting actions that are trying to hold Biden accountable, which is not the same thing as opposing Biden. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're still going to vote for him, you know. We're just trying to, and that's another reason that they give to these organizations, because then they can cash in that, you know, get receipts for that donation when it comes election time. Like, hey, remember that money we give you? You know, I know you might not agree with everything we're doing, but you know you're going to go for Biden, right? Trying to hold Biden accountable, which is not the same thing as opposing Biden. It's saying we desperately don't want the alternative, said Barney Kasim, a spokesperson for Solidar Action, a group that funds social justice movements. Solidar has received financial support from the Pritzkers, who also founded the Libra Foundation, which funds smaller nonprofits that address criminal justice, environmental, and gender justice issues. Susan Pritzker declined to comment for this story. Some of the groups funded by Libra have also been involved in the protests against Israel's response to the October 7th attack by Hamas. I love how they frame that too. The protests against Israel's response to the October 7th attack. It's not like Israel's flat out genocide and murder of civilians and starving of civilians. It's their response to the brutal October 7th attacks that killed so many Jewish people. For instance, the Climate Justice Alliance took part in pro-Palestinian marches that have used the phrase Genocide Joe. Black Organizing for Leadership and Dignity, another group backed by the Libra Foundation, promotes pro-Palestinian demonstrations on its website. And a third, the Immigrant Defense Project, was part of a protest in Washington that saw 13 activists arrested by Capitol Police after demanding a permanent ceasefire in Gaza. The Tides Foundation, hold on a second. I forgot to change the slide. My bad. The Tides Foundation, funded by the Pritzker, has also supported the Adala Justice Project, which has also been part of protests at Columbia University. The group wrote on X, formerly Twitter, that universities are hedge funds deeply embedded with weapons manufacturers. Now, that right there is a completely provable and salient point. And you hear these people coming out and saying, Oh, these protesters don't even know what they're actually protesting. No, they're saying defund, divest. If you listen to their chants, they're this is what they're protesting. The fact that their institutions of learning are intertwined with weapons manufacturers, and that right there is why the Israel protest is off limits, because they're making money from this. It's insane. So let's keep going. Universities are hedge funds deeply embedded with weapons manufacturers. Tides also supports Palestine Legal, a legal defense fund that offers legal assistance to students mobilizing against genocide. The Tides Foundation issued, I like how they put that in quotes, students mobilizing against genocide, so they claim. The Tides Foundation issued a statement about funding groups that protest, saying it is committed to advancing social justice, adding that its community of fiscally sponsored projects, donors, and grantees represent a wide range of perspectives on what social justice looks like. I mean, to me, what's interesting about all of this is I didn't know that all these Democratic mega donors were behind funding all of these organizations. And so now you know all these NGOs, you know, how they get their money and why they're slanted the way they are. And again, I'm sorry for spending so much time. I'm actually reading this full article, but I think it's worth going into the weeds on, because at the end of the day, it brings up a lot of points way below the headline that are pretty valid. So, all right, to keep moving, we're almost done. Palestine Legal has been a fiscally sponsored project of the Tide Center since 2013 and a Dollar Justice project since 2016. According to a spokesperson, Jewish Voice for Peace and If Not Now are grantee partners. So those two organizations get grants from like Soros funded organizations and Pritzker funded organizations. They got those grants before October 7th. So they didn't even know October 7th was going to happen. And they use their money to fund social justice causes. So the idea that Soros and Pritzker are funding the protests is a manufactured idea. They are not. They're funding organizations that give money to other organizations that are involved in the protests. Now, that said, there are some protests that Jewish Voice for Peace have organized. Like they just said, they organized the one at the Radio City Music Hall event with Stephen Colbert and all the shit libs. Anyway, here's the clincher line that illustrates the point I was making about how this article is really a note to the donors to stop funding these organizations and make sure you pull fund. This is the press's way of getting money removed. You know, this is the press's way of deplatforming organizations they disagree with. This line is key. Some donors may use this moment to reevaluate where their money goes, something that Conlon, the Democratic bundler, acknowledged. They might be less inclined to give in the future if they feel strongly about it. Inevitably, there will be conflicts, he said. You're not going to sync perfectly all the time. And so that was kind of the summation of that article. And I just did that to show you that, again, the idea that Soros is funding the protests is complete masturbation. It's right-wing grift masturbation. And the press is a right-wing grift masturbation organization, the mainstream press. So, of course, they're going to support that. They're going to find a way to justify that narrative, which they did here. And look, there are connections, you know. So that's the argument they're making. There are connections, but once you go into the weeds and you really learn about what those connections entail, it completely destroys the dumb fuck narrative that Soros and Democratic donors are funding the protests. And this is what you're going to hear in right-wing circles. I've already heard it multiple times because all the talk radio douchebags and all that are like, oh, it's Soros, so stupid. So for the final kind of icing on the cake here, I want to show you this video of Simone Zimmerman, who is a woman I have a lot of respect for. And this is from an earlier stream I did, but here she kind of talks about the whole purpose of her organization and her views and watch what she has to say.
I mean, I think there was, there's of course all these incredibly disingenuous.
So she is from the organization. She founded the organization, if not now.
People who will say just outright smear all Palestine marches as anti-Semitic. And by
the way, I obviously stole this from Katie Halper, so mad props to Katie Halper. A anti-Zionist Jew, by the way.
It just strikes me as just it's so frustrating, because I think it's fair to say that probably in every single city in which Jews live and there are Palestine marches, there are probably Jews at those marches. Yeah. We are in this movement. We see the freedom for Palestinians as it's not just like, I mean, we see the injustices that are happening, and we're outraged on a human level, but also as Jews, we do feel a responsibility to be in this movement also for like our own liberation as well. And so I think just like the erasure, of the diversity of perspectives in our community, and what safety means for us. And then, so, and that's not to just get into the whole other side, which is like, it actually makes it harder to understand real anti-Semitism, right, to take it on. The Anti-Defamation League regularly lumps anti-Israel incidents in with anti-Semitic incidents. How do we even, how can we even have data, have information about the real, like, material reality of anti-Semitism, where it's coming from, what the phenomenon is, when it's constantly being mixed up with, like, a Palestinian student waving a flag on campus or whatever.
Right. And it makes it a lot easier for people to.
I want to clip that part of her. That is such a great point. Let me play that again real quick. Oh, here we go.
Anti-Semitic. And it just strikes me as just so reality of anti-Semitism, where it's coming from, what the phenomenon is, when it's constantly being mixed up with, like, a Palestinian student waving a flag on campus or whatever.
Try that again.
Like, material reality of anti-Semitism, where it's coming from, what the phenomenon is, when it's constantly being mixed up with, like, a Palestinian student waving a flag on campus or whatever.
Right.
So anyway, you get the point. That's Simone Zimmerman talking about the disingenuous use of anti-Semitism to take the legs out from under protesters. America 2024. Welcome, kids. Moving on. So there was a recent clip of Senator Tom Cotton, who we all know and love, friend of the show, Senator Tom Cotton, big politics fan, I'm sure. And in this clip, Tom Cotton calls these college protests little gazas. And I think there's just a lot that's really relevant about this. So check this out. I'm going to just let you watch it, and then we'll talk about it.
Largely a practical difference about circumstances here in our defense industrial base. The Democrats, though, they have deep philosophical divisions on Israel. That's why you see all these little gazas out there on campuses where you have people chanting violence.
I guarantee you this guy has tweeted about Soros funding these too. That's the kind of dipshit he is.
All anti-Semitic rhetoric. That is not something that's going to go away.
Well, let me ask you about that. We saw President Biden come out. I mean, I'm sure you think it was too late, but he did come out and he clearly condemned the violence.
So that's how good the Zionist media is at defaming someone for being even just slightly unaggressive. Like Biden just even slightly like hesitates on like giving Israel every single thing they want and never questioning them. And all of a sudden he's the most anti-Israel president ever to exist.
He's condemned the anti-Semitism. I assume you agree with what he did, even if it was too late.
So no, I think you're mischaracterizing what he did. Yes, it was absolutely too late. It was 2 weeks after these pro-Hamas fanatics had taken over a lot of campuses and set up these little guys.
Pro-Hamas fanatics.
Second, he didn't specifically speak to what they're saying and what they're doing.
Okay, hold on.
Second, he didn't specifically speak. It was absolutely too late. It was 2 weeks after these pro-Hamas fanatics had taken over a lot of campuses and set up these little gazas. Second, he didn't specifically speak to what they're saying and what they're doing. They're chanting final solution or telling Jews to go back to where they came from. They're spray painting buildings.
No, they are not. No, they are not. Pro-Israeli protesters are doing shit like that, as we'll show you in just a minute.
With vile anti-Semitic hate. He said, well, we shouldn't have anti-Semitism.
Okay, let's stop right there. This is what he's talking about. This is Glenn Greenwald, right? Israel supporters, after spending months falsely claiming it was happening, finally found someone on a U.S. college campus who yelled, "Kill the Jews." Unfortunately, that's a quote, by the way. So don't shut me down, YouTube. That's a quote. I'm quoting someone. I'm not saying that. I'm saying someone said that. Unfortunately, for their enduring victimization and censorship campaign, it was yelled by a pro-Israel activist, another hoax. And so here's the source of this. Footage taken late Friday night. This is from the Huntington News. Of a tense confrontation between pro-Palestine demonstrators and pro-Israel counter-protesters at the encampment revealed it was a pro-Israel student demonstrator who said, quote, "blank the Jews," asking the pro-Palestine demonstrators, anybody on board, anybody on board. Hours later, the same statement was used by Northeastern as part of the reason for clearing out the Gaza Solidarity encampment in Centennial Common, which resulted in detainment of over 100 individuals. So people on the right saw this shit happening during January 6th. This is such an intelligence tactic. It's such a tactic where they set these things up and then make it look like they go instigate violence and then go, "Oh, the protesters are violent," you know? So it's absolutely ridiculous. And I got a little distracted because someone just texted me. But I want to show you just another extreme example of this fake anti-Semitism, this fake, it's first of all, the US is the king of media, right? Like we're the best at creating narratives. We are obviously the global media superpower. You know, our media, our rock and roll, our iPhones, our Facebook and Twitter, all that stuff. Media is our power. We control. It could be argued that we're the global media superpower, right? I mean, I don't think anyone could not argue that. Even in other countries where there are media conglomerations, we have hands in them. So watch this breakdown. And I only took like half of this. He always does a fantastic job, by Matt Orfalea. And I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. Matt Orfalea is literally the Jon Stewart of this generation, because this is the kind of stuff that Jon Stewart's team used to do. They used to take these, press narratives, these water cooler narratives that everyone was saying, the student protesters are pro-Hamas. Like, they would take that and then show you why it's BS. So here, Matt Orfalea does this brilliantly, and I just want to let you see.
Turning violent, our next guest saying, quote, "I was stabbed in the eye."
Stabbed for being a Jew.
There's a video on my Twitter.
We will not stop, we will not rest this close. Divest. We will not stop, we will not rest this close. Divest.
See, I can't move forward.
We will not rest this close. Divest. We will not stop, we will not rest this close. Divest. We will not stop, we will not rest this close.
Okay, so anyone who tells you the protesters don't know what they're doing there, that's what they're doing there. This they don't know is a narrative perpetrated by right wingers who selectively edit. The guy from Trigonometry did it. He went out and, like, of course, cherry picked footage of dumb protesters that don't really know anything about why they're there. But if you listen to the things they're chanting, you would know why they're there. And apparently the Trigonometry guy isn't smart enough to do that. He's just going to selectively edit, footage to prove that people are dumb. It's a Fox News tactic. They've been doing this for years. They did it in the Iraq War. They'd go to the protests and be like, see, they're all dumb. They did it in Vietnam. That's why all the war protesters were hippies. So they run this narrative every time, and dipshits fucking buy it every time. And guys, come on, you're better than this.
Divest! It's closed! Divest! We will not rest this closed! Divest! We will not stop, we will not rest this closed! Divest! Oh, you stop!
No. A complete embellishment.
One Jewish student at Yale was stabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag.
I like how when he cuts to that Braun clip, he goes, complete embellishment. The announcer goes, complete embellishment.
Stabbing students in the eye with flags.
Stabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag.
Saying that her eye had been messed up.
That she was assaulted. Stabbed in the eye with an anti-Israel protester's flag.
A demonstrator jammed a Palestinian flag into her left eye.
Jabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag.
Stabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag. Yale's investigating the attack.
Having her eye stabbed with a Palestinian flag.
Yes.
So there's a lot of violence going on.
Injuring our guest.
Poked in the eye with a flagpole. And hospitalized!
You had to receive hospital treatment for your injury.
It's a heart attack, needed hospital treatment for that injury.
What is the nature of your injury?
I could just feel the pressure of what happened, and like I have a headache.
Oh boy.
Sahar Tartak says she was assaulted for wearing Jewish attire.
Quite obvious. I wear modest dress. I have a Star of David. Quite obvious. And they identified us pretty much immediately.
Then what happened?
There's a video on my Twitter of students passing by me in a circle as they encircled me.
They started taunting me and giving me their middle finger.
Oh my God! And they all, one after the other, taunted me. All, one after the other, taunted me.
Disclose! Divest! Disclose! Divest! We will not rest.
Okay. It was not just like one of them taunted me. They all taunted me one after the other, waving things in my face, and then this culminated in a physical assault.
Okay. You have people getting stabbed in the eye.
Stabbed in the eye!
Jabbed in the eye with a Palestinian flag.
So the FBI should be looking very closely at this.
This is not some inert protest movement. It is menacing.
A Jewish Yale University student says that she was attacked during an anti-Israel protest. Meanwhile, the IDF launched a deadly series of airstrikes.
This doctor works efficiently to help the baby girl breathe, her lungs not yet fully developed. Her mother was 6 months pregnant when she was killed in an Israeli airstrike.
So there you have it. Manufactured bullshit. And I'm really disappointed in conservatives because they're showing their cult status as well. They make fun of the liberals for being cult and stupid and crying for safe spaces and believing the bullshit narratives in the media. Literally 5 minutes ago, these same conservatives were like, oh, the media is full of shit. They can see the media, what they're doing around J6 and the Trump thing. But as soon as it's something like this that appeals to their base emotions, they become, putty. They're like, oh, everything they're saying is true. It's anti-Semitic, and the media never lies now because it's something that I care about. And so, of course, everything you see on TV is true, and there's no need to investigate any of it because college protesters are just dummies. As Constantine from Trigonometry showed you with cherry-picked footage, instead of showing the chants they just did. I'm real disappointed because I really thought that the conservative folks were standing up for things and finally showing some moral courage and consistency. And that's not to discount people like Candace Owens, for example, who lost her job from, deviating from the right-wing narrative You know, the silver lining of this is people, grifters, frankly, like Ben Shapiro being exposed, because Andrew Schultz, I saw a clip of Andrew Schultz going at Ben Shapiro, and it blew me away because Andrew Schultz was calling out Ben Shapiro for being a hypocrite, for saying facts don't care about your feelings. And now suddenly facts care about Ben's feelings. And then all the stuff that he's done, the disingenuous stuff he's done with Candace Owens, it's just disgusting. But now people can see, hey, this guy's whole free speech. Oh, I'm an absolute free speech absolutist. You know, I'll protect the college campuses or safe space people or whiny, you know, people who don't care about they're all feelings based. And now, just like that, he's one of them. Ben Shapiro is literally one of the people he has spent years making fun of. It's insane to see it. And again, it's the new media space is intellectual honesty. And I love it because I'm one of those people who I probably because I'm old, but that's a whole other story. I'm willing to admit when I'm wrong about something. So if you've got evidence to prove me wrong, I'll come around and say, hey, yeah, I was wrong about this, and I'll change my views. And I think the Joe Rogans and the Tucker Carlsons of the world fit more in that category than, say, the Keith Olbermanns or the Rachel Maddows or the even, you know, who's popular on Fox News. I don't know right now, but that's the world we live in now. So the last icing, the icing on this cake, I don't know if you've been following the Kendrick Lamar beef with Drake, but wow. I mean, I'm pretty sure you know what category, which side I'm on of that. Please. West Coast. Kendrick Lamar, Compton's finest, you know. But for me, just to take a little aside here, rap battles are really about lyrics and character and, you know, authenticity and all that stuff. And when you look at someone like Drake, and this is what I broke it down to, I won't show the tweet, but I said something along the lines of, at the end of the day, with the Drake versus Kendrick battle, first of all, it's one of the most exciting things in rap in years. So kudos to them both for that. And, you know, whatever you want to say about Drake, he's built an empire with his music, and you got to respect that. But what I said, at the end of the day, it all breaks down to this. Kendrick Lamar is a black man who grew up in Compton, and Drake is a Canadian child actor. So, I mean, that's pretty much all you need to know about that. But I got this clip because I was watching Anthony Fantano, the world's busiest music geek, The Needle Drop. If you know, you know, he's pretty YouTube famous. He does good work. And this really, you know, I've criticized the guy in the past, but I just want to show this because not only do I want to give him props for saying what he says, I also want to boost, you know, obviously if they're getting a boost on Fantano, they don't need my help, but I want to boost the cause he's supporting here, because what he's supporting is basically a fund for jailed campus protesters. And just check this out because this is kind of like the end cap for this segment, if you will.
Which is absolutely true. It's sort of a shame that the van got destroyed in that way. Quick shout out to campusbailfunds.com. There are a lot of innocent kids who are protesting for a great cause, getting harassed, beaten, and arrested by absolute disgusting pigs of police officers.
Yes.
And if you could throw any money their way to make sure that they get out of prison because they don't deserve to be in there, that would be great. That would be amazing. You see the URL scrolling over there. Again, it's campusbailfunds.com. Support the efforts of those on college campuses trying to get their institutions to divest from a genocidal terror state. Thank you. All right, moving on from there.
I love that end cap. Let me just play that one more time. Just that end
which
cap.
Is absolutely true. To divest from trying to get their institutions to divest from a genocidal terror state. Thank you. To get their institutions to divest from a genocidal terror state. Thank you.
What are they trying to do, Anthony?
To get their institution of those on college campuses, trying to get their institutions to divest from a genocidal terror state. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. Well said. That's what the college protests are about. Not anti-Semitism. They're not dummies like the stupid trigonometry guy, the right-wing grifter posting cherry-picked footage of dumb protesters. That is they do that stuff every time. Every fucking time. That's why the hippies were the Vietnam War protest. Because they could go, look, all the dirty hippies protested. You want to be like them? Support our war. Think, people. Come on. Think for yourselves. Use some common sense. Use past evidence and precedent. Do you trust these people? Why do you trust these people on one thing but not another thing? Ask yourself these questions when you watch this stuff. Moving on. This next one's a banger. This is about Joe Rogan being wrong, which is rare. I think Joe Rogan, honestly, I make no secret about it. I'm a big fan of Rogan. I think he does great work, and I don't always agree with him. I think he definitely leans weird directions on stuff sometimes, and this is one of those incidents. But it's part of a larger conversation and about the nature of the protests, still kind of sticking with that theme a little bit, but just listen to, this is Rogan and Colin Quinn.
The weird time in life in the 70s.
After Vietnam was really winding down, it was almost done. Now,
Vietnam, there you go. We have seen this type of thing before in the past, and so we have historical precedent we can look at, and we can look at the types of things that happened during these prior eras. Now, I also want to say Colin Quinn here, I was a huge fan of a show he had called Tough Crowd back in the day. And it was kind of like that era's version of like Kill Tony or At Midnight or one of those type of shows where he would bring these comedians on, they would talk about news issues, and they would have to like quickly write a bit about something. And if you know Greg Giraldo, he always like murdered it. That was like one of my favorite byproducts of that show. A lot of people didn't get it. It was kind of a little too intellectual, I think, for the average person. Probably ahead of its time. But anyway, listen to them talking about the campus protests and their kind of views on this.
Now we're back to 1968.
Yeah, we're right there right now.
We're in 1968
We're waiting for
right
Kent
now.
State to jump off. You seen these fucking protests that are happening in colleges?
Yeah.
First of all, these kids are all wearing masks. They're outside, they're protesting, and they're all wearing masks.
Mhm.
I say that it's like the Democrats' MAGA hat. That's what the mask is.
Now, he's not wrong about that, but I will say the reason the protesters are wearing masks is actually because they'll lose their jobs if they are identified in photos. So a lot of them are covering up for that reason, or trying to be low key. But also a lot of the people wearing masks are counter protesters, as we showed before with that tweet from the Shirion Collective asking people to wear masks and be instigators.
Isn't it?
Nice.
You're letting everybody know. You're letting everybody know that you're a part of the Klan, that you're on the good side.
Yeah.
I'm masking for your safety.
Yeah.
They're just bizarre human beings coming out of colleges today.
Well, I look
fully
at
brainwashed.
Yeah.
Now, that is always, of course, the narrative with college kids. They're this generation is terrible. All the parents said the same shit during the Vietnam era. These kids today in their protests, civil rights era, these kids today, and now this.
Well, I say it this way. It's 20%, let's say 20% of them are just 20% of them are kids that were raised to hate the West. Everything in the West is bad. They're brainwashed, which is really the whole curriculum is 20% of that.
Okay, now I just want to make this point here. As I just showed you, there's these people, like, there's no nuance with this kind of stuff, and that's intentional because it's like what he's saying right here. These kids they're all taught to hate the West. No, they're taught to view things critically, and to do that, you have to criticize the West and go, hey, it's bad that Russia invaded Ukraine, but why did we invade Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya, Afghanistan the second time, Iraq the second time, Ukraine, we're funding stuff in Ukraine. That is what this boils down to. It's not that gets called hating America, being honest and having a critical view of your country, which is honestly more loving and a more love, way to approach things. If you've ever been a parent, like, you don't just let your kids fuck up. You criticize them. If your kid's getting an F in, social studies class, you don't go, "That's all right, buddy. We're number one." You go, "Hey, motherfucker, you need to get your act together." Anyway.
Then I'd say 20% are kids that are they're the kids that feel like they want to be like when I was in college. Like when I was in college, remember this is happening during finals week. So 20% of finals protesters, where if somebody came up to me when I was in college and said, "Listen, next week is finals. You know you're going to fail. How about this? We're going to give you some money from this George Soros fund. It's a Venmo thing. We're going to give you money. You stand out."
The George Soros thing again. Yeah, George Soros is giving all the protesters money. That's what he does. He's out there, like, "Hey, you want some money to protest? Because I clearly hate Biden." That's the other thing that I think is so funny about the conservatives thinking that, Soros is funding the protests. I thought he was working for Biden. Why would he fund protests against Biden? That's the dumbest idea ever. Like, how do you wrap your head around that? I mean, I guess you have to be the same type of person that's pro-life, but also supports the death penalty. It's like that kind of, you have to be the kind of person who can do those mental gymnastics. Well, the people that are being executed are guilty. Not always, as we've seen. So, but I'm pro-life, but I support the death penalty. All you have to do is say that out loud to realize how stupid it is. Anyway, Soros is supporting biggest Democratic donor, George Soros, who wants to get Biden reelected, is supporting protests against him, funding protests against him. Yes.
Side, and you block the other. Not only do you not have to take your finals, you're going to block the kids that are going to make you look bad and pass their finals. You're going to block them from coming to class. I would have said, give me the scarf.
See, that's actually kind of a valid point. I do think that there is some validity to that. I don't think the percentage is large, but I do think there are a percentage of kids who are like going with the flow, right? Or there's like hot bitches. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of the hottest women out there are free Palestine. It's just the truth. So, so I can see a lot of college guys going, "You know what? Like, Megan's going to the protest, so I think I'm gonna suit up and go too." So there's some validity to that point, I think, because it's college.
On right now. Then you got 20% kids are going to be. They're like the ones that are peer pressured by their roommates. Because if your roommates with people in college, they know your schedule, so they go, "Hey, we're going to go protest genocide." You can't say, I was going to go to the bar. So half these kids are like, "God damn it, now I got to go out to the protest or I look bad in front of all my roommates."
Have you ever seen when they get interviewed? Konstantin Kisin from Trigonometry, he went to the protests and he was just asking them, like, what the river to the sea, what does that mean to you? Like, asking questions.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think should happen? Like,
hey, Joe, do you think that at any point Konstantin Kisin asked what this means?
Chest turning violent. Our next hospital treatment. She was assaulted, stabbed in the eye.
Pretty much immediately they started.
Where is it?
Taunted me. One after the all, one after the other taunted me.
Disclose! Divest! Disclose! Divest! We will not.
So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is I wonder if Konstantin Kisin asked them, I didn't watch it, maybe I'll have to go watch it and see. He asked them what "from the river to the sea" means, which is a vague statement at its best, It could mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But defund, divest is very specific. I wonder if he asked them what that means. But let's keep listening to Joe.
Well, what do you think the history of Palestine is?
Right.
Like,
yeah, and now they're literally.
So again, it has nothing to do with what the history of Palestine is or any of that stuff. As the chanters were saying,
literally praying. They're praying to Mecca now. Did you see all the footage of them?
Oh, wonderful.
They're bowing. It's like, I am object.
Yeah. See, again, footage. The U.S. is the best propagandist organization in the world. So, and guess who else is? The fucking IDF, the Mossad, all the people that, all this intelligence bullshit. These people, Joe Rogan and Colin Quinn will criticize that stuff and be critical of it on anything but this, right? It's like, oh, well, I saw footage of them praying to Mecca and like all the protesters are clearly terrorists. Like, as I've shown you multiple times, 99% of that footage is manufactured. Like the kids taking down the American flag and putting up a Palestinian one, that kind of stuff is clearly an op. Just like my pinned tweet. Go look at my pinned tweet if you have any questions.
Actively, like, going to put a fatwa on my mother. If she
I just want to come out publicly and say it. China, Russia, you guys won. You won.
Yeah.
So this is where it gets good, okay? It is so clear that all the hype around Trump and Russia and all that stuff was manufactured bullshit. But this is an area where Joe Rogan will be like, just becomes a friggin' drooling imbecile and just believes it.
You got our kids. You got the kids. You got a lot of them. You got more of them than you didn't get.
No, they don't want them. Listen,
Russia's influencing our colleges. Russia has taken control. At no point do they bring up the reality of what these protests are and how much control the Israeli lobby and government has over the colleges and how much control the arms industry has. Joe Rogan, did you know that Hillary Clinton is a professor at Columbia? Did you know that? Did you know that there is a Israeli spy who is a professor at Columbia, Joe? Did you know that? Like, what's this? But somehow he believes Russia is influencing American politics and and China is controlling our No one is better at propaganda than the United States, Joe. No one. There is no fucking way that China and Russia control the political narrative in the United States. That is a fucking ridiculous premise. So let's keep listening, and then I've got receipts.
Listen, China, they're teaching kids computer engineering. All schools are teaching, like, state-sanctioned violence in Shakespeare sonnets and,
Guys with fake eyelashes reading to toddlers. Yeah, that's what it is.
Like, I think that's an op too, a lot of that. Like, I really do. Everything is an op until proven otherwise.
That's what TikTok is. Our TikTok's a disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're smart. I mean,
so this is another area, just to take a quick aside. Joe Rogan has admitted several times he's not on TikTok, and he's like, oh, our TikTok's a disaster. Have you ever looked at fucking TikTok, Joe? Because mine isn't. Mine is all like videos of you and people like Tucker Carlson and people, politics, people having like intelligent political debates and discussions. So this is another propaganda point that like our TikTok is full of just people dancing and drooling and China has like engineering on theirs. No, TikTok is whatever your fucking algorithm curates for you based on what you like. So if you're a drooling idiot who just wants to watch people dancing all the time, that's what you're going to get. But if you're like me and you're into politics and, heavy metal and stuff like that, that's what you're going to get in your feed. And Joe Rogan's the kind of person who, if I came at him with these points, would go, you know what? That's a fair point, I'm sure. So no hate towards Joe. It just makes me angry that he's this ignorant about stuff like this because he's usually really good.
They got us. They won. They won the ideological battle.
China and Russia did it. They did. They control America. You're right. They got Trump elected too, right, Joe? It's it. It's over. Putin runs everything.
Destroyed our universities.
Yeah.
They've destroyed our faith
But they
system.
didn't. We did.
Yeah, but
now let's remember there's actually financial trails to defense industry in Israel at these institutions. He's not talking about that, Russia and China
did. They infiltrated the universities.
It happened way before that, in my opinion.
When did it happen?
They just went like this. All they had to do was go like this.
You ever see Yuri Bezmenov talk about it? He's a
Here we go.
defector from the KGB. He talked about it in a famous interview from 1984. We talk about it way too much, so I'm sorry if you're hearing this again, folks. But he basically laid out exactly what was going to happen to America in 1964. And he was saying
64?
Yep. Or excuse me, 1984. He was saying that Marxism and Leninist ideas they've infiltrated all the universities with these ideas. They're teaching them to children, and you have like 2 generations from now, you're going to be fucked.
Now, I decided to go in the weeds on Yuri Bezmenov because that is suspect. And the reason I say that is suspect is because historically, what the US does, the security state does, is they employ defectors from countries who have a beef with the leadership there to manufacture fake stories. The Nayera testimony is a great example. If you don't know about the Nayera testimony, she was a Saudi, I think, or maybe an Iraq, basically, I think she was a Saudi or a Kuwaiti who testified to Congress about like all the brutal stuff that Iraq was doing. And it was completely manufactured by a PR firm. And you can look this up on Wikipedia. It's all out there now. So they do that shit. And so when Joe's talking about Yuri Bezmenov, I'm like, he's a defector, huh? Well, let's learn about who Yuri Bezmenov is from the website CIA.gov. That's right. I got this screenshot directly from the CIA's website. And first of all, here's what it reads. Okay. No, this is from a FOIA act, right? KGB defector blames 60s activists for Soviet success. So this guy was like an op before people really understood that there were ops. He was another piece in the, hey, look, the hippies are all communists and we need to stomp them because they're against America and they're working with Russia. This is a playbook that has been employed throughout history over and over again with great success. And like, just read this. This is so great. Collection, general CIA records. Let's see, December published creation date, December 22nd, 2016. Is that right? Okay. I love this. Sanitized copy approved for release 2010. March 20 KGB defector. So it's let me zoom in on this a little bit. March 1986, KGB defector blames 60s activist for Soviet success as a hashish smoking hippie member of the same generation he now claims undermining American resolve to confront communist aggression. Schumann, aka Moscow-born Yuri Bezmenov, claims 60s peace activists have come of age and have infested U.S. institutions with liberalism and worse, naive notions of student global brotherhood. Instead of thinking they are stinking, he told a sparse crowd of high school students Saturday in Reading, you are stuck with them. That's crazy. 60s generation is now in power. They control the media, but not you. Balding and dressed in a conventional white shirt and ties. I love that they put that in there, balding. Like, this is clearly like an attack on him almost. Strident, fist-pounding, 70-minute oratory. He took advantage of the platform provided him at the Holiday Inn by the North State chapter of Citizens for America, a pro-Reagan group. Expound his theory of a subverted U.S. press. Schumann blasted traitors like Jane Fonda, Walter Cronkite, and Ted Koppel, and repeatedly plugged his 44-page tract, Love Letter to America. So this is the guy, Joe Rogan. This is the proof Joe Rogan has that, you know, Russia and China have infiltrated our colleges. This dude, Yuri Bezmenov, who's clearly like a CIA asset or a crackpot, one or the other, probably both. But I just thought that was funny. And Joe Rogan is the kind of guy who's skeptical about everything, but you know, he's not going to go into the weeds on this. And I've seen him cite this guy several times, you know, as a source. Like when he brings this up all the time, how Russia and China have clearly infiltrated our colleges, and that's what. It's not that they're, you know, paying attention to the reality of what's going on, like we showed you with that chant. It's that they've been infiltrated and are now being controlled by communist ideology that's propagated by Russia and China. And that's what the CIA wants people to believe, so they can, you know, get you to support wars in countries like Ukraine and censorship of the internet against people who spread disinformation, which Joe Rogan is a victim of. So he's, you know, I don't know. It really bothers me. All right. I'm going to take just a quick break. Nah, fuck it. I'm not going to take a break. I don't need to take a break. I have all this stuff lined up. So our next segment is affectionately titled Trumpaganda. And it all begins a couple days ago when I decided to watch a PBS NewsHour report. Now, as you know, PBS is funded by the government. But what a lot of people don't know is that in 2013, during the Obama era, a law was passed called the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. And what that did was remove the barriers that the global, the US kind of media apparatus, propaganda apparatus, which has existed for a long time, but in other countries. So, for example, Voice of America, right? Voice of America, I mean, I'm not saying they're all even bad. Like they do some good work, but they are literally the American propaganda arm for other countries. So it's government created propaganda that's piped into other countries, right? And that's just reality. Like that's been that way for a long time. In 2013, the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act basically removed the barriers so that propaganda could now be used here in the United States. And you can see this so clearly now, the way, the media pretty much parrots what the administration wants. I mean, that's evident. I'm going to show you footage of the White House Correspondents Dinner in a minute, it's just the media and the Biden administration sucking each other's dicks for 2 hours. But I want to start by showing you this PBS clip real quick, and we'll talk about it. I'm going to stop it a couple times and take side trails. So
out of the courtroom and back on the campaign trail today in Wisconsin with a familiar refrain about undocumented immigrants.
We're going to have the largest deportation in the history of our country. We have no choice.
It was the latest example of the policies he would like to implement if reelected, and it follows a wide-ranging interview with Time magazine that sparked headlines about what he would do in a second term. Lisa Desjardins joins us now. So Lisa, there's a lot in this interview, but let's start with how Donald Trump
there's a lot to unpack here. So
would staff his administration and what sounds like a litmus test about the 2020 election.
Yeah, Time magazine said overall this was a picture of a man who wants an imperial presidency, someone who plans to ramp up and intensify, not soften what he's doing. And that's where we get to 2020. He again repeated the idea that the election was stolen from him. He said there was proof. We know the proof goes the other way, that the 2020 election was one of the most well-regarded and well-monitored elections in U.S. history.
One of the things that people don't know is that on the way out of office in 2015, Jay Johnson, the Department of Homeland Security director at the time, passed a law putting elections under the Department of Homeland Security. That's how these people can say this was the most secure election ever, because the Department of Homeland Security says it was, because it was under their supervision. I don't even have to go into the weeds about, the years of Russiagating and claiming that the 2016 election was a fraud, because we all know Putin and China control everything and they control America. But let's keep going.
But Time magazine asked him specifically about something Republicans elsewhere are doing. They are asking people who apply for jobs if they think that Joe Biden won the election. So Time magazine asked former President Trump.
That premise is very interesting. Asking people who applied for jobs if they think Joe Biden won the election. You think they got those jobs if they said no? Holy shit.
What he thought about that idea. And Time's Eric Cortellis said his response to that gave him a very sharp impression.
He wants to go into a second term and consolidate power into the office of the presidency.
So let's break that down for a minute. Let's break down what this douchebag is saying. He wants to consolidate power. Now, I'm sure what Trump has said is that he wants to fire everyone and replace them. And that threatens a lot of the Washington long stays. So this is them panicking. Because as we know, the media makes content and writes articles for the people who are, for the elected leaders, the people, the donors, the political class, the political ruling class, basically, the people who actually run the country with money. Also, Trump would be smart to do that because a lot of the, establishment figures are what sunk his last presidency.
So that he can remove the guardrails that stood in his way from implementing his agenda the last time he was in office. What Donald Trump was conveying.
And his agenda might be talking to our adversaries and winning economically, or, integrating more closely economically with them. And if we do that, we can't spend a bunch of money on wars because we're not afraid of them anymore.
To me was that he would not be inclined to hire anyone who has come out and admitted that Donald Trump lost the last election.
I don't think he actually said that, but let's say he did. Imagine Biden, going and getting like people who said that he lost, who are saying that he lost the election. Imagine Biden like going out and hiring those people. Like, why is it a double standard for Trump? I mean, I don't,
And so I think he is planning to fill the most important offices in the executive branch with true believers of the MAGA doctrine.
There's a reason that that's called.
That's what you would do. You fill your administration with people who are going to work with you to make it, make policies happen.
The big lie, because that goes to our democracy itself. And here, former President Trump is saying, no, I might not hire anyone who thinks otherwise. I need people to support that idea that only I can win, only I ever have won when I ran.
It's always the threat to democracy thing, too. They kind of weave that in, the threat to democracy, 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 threat to democracy.
Another topic, immigration and the border. This has been the cornerstone of his campaign.
Threat to democracy that the security state controls.
What's he saying in this interview?
Right. This gets to migrants. He is becoming more militant and more martial in what he is talking about here. He is calling for nothing less than the largest deportation in American history. He gave some more details. He specifically used these numbers: 15 to 20 million people.
Now that sounds really scary, doesn't it? The largest deportation in history. Ooh, authoritarian. Ah, no. That's my impression of liberals. Watch and learn. Obama has deported more people than any other president. Why wasn't that scary, guys? Let's read a little bit of this. I just took a couple of choice cuts from this. I just want to take this sidebar. Between 2009 and 2015, his administration has removed more than 2.5 million people through immigration orders, which doesn't include the number of people who self-deported or were turned away and or returned to their home country at the border by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. So he removed 2.5 million people through immigration orders. Interesting. Wonder if Trump can do that. How does he compare to other presidents? According to governmental data, the Obama administration has deported more people than any other president's administration in history. So maybe they're upset he's going to beat Obama's deportation record. Is that why they're so scared about this? Maybe. In fact, they have deported more than the sum of all presidents of the 20th century. Yes. How many people have been deported under Obama? President Barack Obama has often been referred to by immigration groups as the deporter in chief. So I just wanted to make sure people remember that as we go down this wormhole with what a threat Trump is. But let's keep watching.
Former president told Time magazine. How would he do that? He said he would use local law enforcement and the military, National Guard. Didn't really get into too many details about that. But he was asked specifically.
Maybe he should try immigration orders like Obama did.
specifically about how that comports with U.S. law, which says the military cannot, in fact, be used to be deployed against civilians. I want to read you the quote from what he told Time magazine about that. He said, of migrants, these aren't civilians. These are people that aren't legally in our country. This is an invasion of our country. I can see myself using the National Guard, and if necessary, I'd have to go a step further. This is invoking...
Now, Trump is just spitballing, I'm sure, because he wants to solve the problem. He's the kind of guy who's like, sees a problem. Again, I don't want to go down the wormhole in that because you're like, oh, you're pro-Trump, whatever. No, I'm just calling Trump like he was before he got into politics and was constantly being smeared.
Obviously marshal powers in a way that we haven't really seen in this issue at all. Now, as for would he have mass detention camps, he said possibly, but he doesn't think they're needed.
There's the Nazi threat to democracy thing. There's that scare tactic.
I will say right now, the U.S. is actually allowing for more bed space for migrant detention. That's something that this Congress and president are doing, but that's to the tune of a few thousand migrants. What he's talking about is millions. This is a deportation that really almost has no comparison point in terms of forced movement of people on a global scale.
No comparison except Barack Obama, the deporter-in-chief who deported 2.5 million immigrants with immigration orders.
Abortion, we've seen Donald Trump shift his stance seemingly to match with the kinds of voters he's trying to win over he has in the past.
Okay, now this is where they pivot to the misogyny angle. And this is, because Trump's anti-women. So it's hard for them to paint that picture now because he came out and said, you know what, which I think is probably the smartest move he could have made. Let the states decide. He even came out against the Florida 6-week abortion ban, and they talk about that. So I'll let you watch.
Taking credit for overturning Roe. Now he says he disagrees with Florida's 6-week abortion ban, which took effect today. What's he saying to Time magazine now in this interview?
Yeah, you're so right. This is a tricky issue for this president. He's someone who wants to run the Republican Party on every other issue, but on this one, he is consistently saying, and he did again in this interview, he wants to leave it to the states. That is because his own personal view that he's expressed, that a 6-week ban is too far, is something that's a problem with those on the right. So
there you
he
go.
was asked some specific questions that I think were interested, and I want to get into a few of those questions that stood out in this interview. One, he was asked, should states monitor pregnancies to determine if an abortion happened in a state where it is illegal? Trump responded, I think they might do that.
There it is. You better be scared, ladies. They're going to monitor your pregnancy. Keep in mind, they monitor pregnancies anyway to make sure the baby's healthy and stuff. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. But again, they're trying to figure out a way to twist this misogyny knife, even though he kind of pulled it out. He's kind of like, look, he came out against the 6-week abortion ban. I mean, a Republican, that shows you how much the dynamic has shifted in these parties, really. Because now the Democrats, that's so smart for him to do that because the Democrats can't really hit him with that now.
Then, should states prosecute women for abortions? He said the states are going to say it's irrelevant whether I'm comfortable or not. Now, again, this is a consistent states will do what they should do policy from the former president. It is.
I don't see what's wrong with that. I mean, that's kind of what he did during COVID, and California had insane regulations and states like Utah did not. So, and Texas.
A policy proposal, it is also political. But this idea that states monitoring pregnancy is something that he could accept is incredibly notable. Whether he's a president who vetoes legislation or not, he's the leader of the Republican Party making these.
No, I said states monitor pregnancy before. I misspoke on that. States don't monitor the pregnancy. The doctor and the patient do, obviously. But that seems like a gigantic waste of resources. And again, the thing that they just passed in Alabama that all the liberals are freaking out about, it just looks stupid. They just look stupid now. Let these deep South countries look stupid and have an exodus of women, and just become anyway, let's keep watching this. This is long.
And what's the picture that this gives overall, Lisa?
Right. This is a picture, as I said, of a president who is ramping up his aggression. His aggressive tactics as a president, trying to really consolidate executive power before
he's a threat to democracy.
Even comes into office. Now, I will say it was a wide-ranging interview. He went into details on economic policy, his ideas on tariffs. This wasn't all just about these cultural hotspots, and it's
But we're only going to talk about the cultural hotspots. You have to go read the Time article if you want to read the rest of the like actual important stuff.
It's really worth people looking at this interview to understand what he says he would do as president. But overall, this is someone who
I feel like my job now is translating mainstream news for people. Here's what they're really saying.
wants to take the Republican Party even further into this direction where it must do exactly what he says and be more aggressive about it.
And that right there is telling, because he wants to take the Republican Party away from the uniparty consensus that they have now, and that's a threat. These people lose some control if that happens, because both parties are owned, and they're like, oh, he's trying to take the Republican Party away from the establishment. Good.
To Republican consultant Kevin Madden, who we have on this show, and he said this could mean more of a stress test for Republicans, especially those in office.
Trump blocks out the sun on all of the other voices inside the party. He expects that the party is going to adopt his view, his language, his approach. And he very much demands fealty from leaders inside the party.
Good. Something needs to change. See, I think what's happening too is if he's talking like that, maybe Steve Bannon's working for him again, and they're actually going to like really implement some populist stuff this time. My fingers are crossed. I'm not counting on it. But do you know who this guy is? Kevin Madden. He's Mitt Romney's chief of staff from when Mitt Romney ran for president. So, I mean, that tells you right there where the divide is. But let's keep going.
One of the challenges for a Trump presidency will be that the idea of an executive equal to a legislative branch is going to be challenged on a day-to-day basis.
Bigger stress test for Republicans means a bigger stress test for the U.S. government, is also what Kevin Madden's saying.
Meantime.
Oh, no! The poor government.
We have some new polling results that look at how and which Americans believe what Donald Trump says.
Truth is such a core part of this.
Truth is such a core part of this. Oh my God. Could she have said anything more Orwellian than that before they go into the clip of their poll, the NPR government-funded poll, literally Biden administration-funded poll, because the Biden administration funds public television, which is an arm of the government, which is now unregulated propaganda because of the repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act, or the passing of the Smith-Mundt Modernization
We
Act.
wanted to ask voters and Americans what they think about how Donald Trump speaks. So let's look at this. When Donald Trump speaks, 31% of people that we polled who are definitely planning to vote, 31% said they believe he's speaking mostly the truth. 34% say he's speaking mostly falsehoods. Now that you're
So that's like obviously an aggregate so that they can, I'm sure the question is, one of these general questions that they can point to with NPR listeners. Yeah, of course, Trump's a liar. Of course. See, we have the data to show it.
doing the math, those in the middle that we don't put there are those who say sometimes it's some of each. But this is interesting on the two polls that we think a third of Americans from this who are voting believe he speaks most.
The reason that they didn't put the sometimes it's both of each is because that's the majority. Like if you add those two together, what is it, 65%? So that leaves 35%, which means that the other 35%, which is more than either of these, thinks it's kind of a combination of both, which makes sense.
Mostly the truth. Now, if you look at this more in depth, you see a gender gap.
Here we go.
Men are the ones who are most likely to believe.
Misogyny. There's how we get the misogyny thing. Only men really believe Trump.
What former President Trump says. And look at that. Women, 45% of women overall believe he speaks mostly falsehoods, that he does tell lies. Now, one other thing, how about strengthening democracy or not? Look at this. We asked voters, these are definite voters, what they think about President Trump and President Biden. They felt 38% that former President Trump is someone.
There it is. Trump is going to weaken democracy. And I'm just going to replay a clip that kind of explains where this narrative comes from that I played a couple weeks ago, because I think it's so good. It deserves another look. And check this out. This is Mike Benz talking about where the threat to democracy.
This Cheney clip posted by Representative Dan Bishop, and it had her describing Trump's run for president in 2024 as potentially the last election in American history. This echoes a long line of foreign policy establishment apex predators who are all now suddenly in unison championing this framing of Trump as a dictator, as an authoritarian. This is obviously stuff they've recycled from before, but it's all sort of converging right now. And, you know, this attack on democracy, dictator, authoritarian thing. And especially this framing of it being the last election if we don't stop it. Now, you have to recognize the trick here and go all the way back to the beginning. The framing techniques they're using right now are the same ones used in 1948 at the very dawn of the creation of the Central Intelligence Agency to create a predicate for dirty tricks. And I'll talk about what those dirty tricks are going to be, but just a quick history lesson here. The CIA was created under the 1947 National Security Act. And
I'm going to jump ahead real quick.
But it lost the popular vote. They were going to mobilize Black Lives Matter to overthrow governments. Now, as we know, from the Time magazine article that came out just weeks after the election, it turned out that the Chamber of Commerce had a deal struck with the AFL-CIO, which used to be called the AFL-CIA by folks back in the 1960s because of how closely it worked with the Central Intelligence Agency as street muscle for overthrowing foreign countries, as what happened in Poland with the trade unions there under Lech Walesa, and in many other countries, but I'll save that for another time. The Chamber of Commerce and the AFL-CIO came to a mutual agreement for a stand down of the destabilizing protests they had planned if Trump had won the election. The Time magazine article stipulates this. Now, wouldn't you know, the Chamber of Commerce and the unions are two of the four stools of the National Endowment for Democracy, which has four branches. The National Democratic Institute, which is for basically Democrat Party payoffs on foreign policy initiatives. The International Republican Institute, which is for Republican Party payoffs on international initiatives. The Center for International Private Enterprise, which is the Chamber of Commerce wing of the CIA cutout. And the Solidarity Center, which is the street muscle labor union wing.
So I don't know if you see where this is going, but these are the owners of democracy, and this is why Trump is a quote unquote threat to democracy.
Of the CIA cutout known as the National Endowment for Democracy. So you had these blob creatures in charge of these destabilization plans. We know that the same way these kind of destabilization protests to shut down the ability to govern are done by our national security state abroad. It happened to have an identical structure in 2020, and it was all done on this predicate that if we don't stop this now, if this man, even if he wins fair and square, the country won't be normal after. There will be the last election ever. The same phrasing they used to justify rigging the Italian election in 1948. This is the predicate to set up those same Department of Dirty Tricks again.
There you go. And you might be saying like, oh, come on, really? Come on. So I just want to show you that this is a playbook that gets used time and time again on anyone who is a threat. They're a racist, they're a misogynist, they're working with Russia. Check this out. Bernie Sanders, Bernie Bros, made me finally recognize misogyny in America. Yes, Bernie Sanders, such a misogynist. Here's NPR. The Bernie Sanders rape fantasy essay explained. So you see how this works. As soon as anyone gets close to the conch, this type of stuff starts coming out. And it's well organized. It's all part of the plan. Here's more. Bernie's mystery Soviet tapes revealed. Yes, he's a secret Russian because he might actually beat the established Democratic Party using small dollar donations. So we got to paint him as a misogynist and a Russian. How Russia's trying to boost Bernie Sanders' campaign. I can't wait for those headlines to come out around Trump. How Russia is boosting Trump in 2024. Why Russia wants Trump to win. Why Hamas loves Trump. You know it's coming. All right. We got a couple more items for you today. So let's see what we got next on the agenda here. Oh, how'd that get in there? I'm sorry. That was not supposed to be in there. Left from a previous slideshow, apparently. All right, we're going to talk about the White House Correspondents Dinner now. And this is, if you don't know what the White House Correspondents Dinner is, it's a jerk-off fest. It's where the press gets together and jerks off politicians, and those politicians jerk off the press. It's just a big mutual jerk-off session. And I want to start by a tweet I put out, start with a tweet I put out a couple days ago that says, nothing exposes how fucking fake the mainstream media is more than the White House Press Correspondents Dinner. Anyone at that dinner who works in the news is a clown of the highest order who waits all year for this event and sacrifices their journalistic integrity to be there. And I stand by that, and you're going to see why. A lot of people played the clips of Colin Yost, licking Biden's anus verbally. But I'm going to show you some different stuff. And I have good reasoning for that. But first of all, I want to show you this clip of Kelly O'Donnell, who is the host of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, explaining why we all need to pay for subscriptions from these papers.
276 days, nearly 12 years since he was kidnapped in Syria. His mother, Deborah.
So Jimmy and Due Dissidents and all the other guys already covered how they went through this roster of, jailed journalists and completely left out Julian Assange and Daniel Hale and what's the guy, Gonzalo Lira, the Ukrainian guy, because it doesn't fit the narrative. But let's keep watching.
Is with us, and Mrs. Tice, we are with you. And Mr. President, again, we humbly ask that you do everything you can to bring them home. Our profession can be perilous. Since October, about 100 journalists have been killed, most of those deaths in Gaza.
And she conveniently leaves out who caused those deaths, because it wasn't Hamas.
According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, around the world, more than 320 reporters imprisoned as of December, including an American with dual Russian citizenship, Alsu Kermayshev, who works for the U.S.-funded Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. She has been jailed in Russia since October.
Radio Free Europe, Radio Free Liberty is the CIA's mouthpiece in Russia. I guarantee you. Not that it's okay that they jailed her, but you have to view these things in context.
Here at home, there are different challenges, online threats, hostility vented at reporters on the job.
This is the part I had to clip this for. Online threats, hostilities vented at reporters on the job. These reporters. This should be called the stenographers. She should just replace that with stenographers on the job. People online are mad that we lie on behalf of politicians. How dare they?
And anxiety is about a paycheck. Layoffs have hit our business very hard this year.
Because you suck.
For news consumers who believe that a free press is essential, demonstrate that belief with a subscription. Show
If you believe a free press is essential, pay for it.
That professionally gathered news is a product you value.
Professionally gathered. That was like her best Hillary Clinton impression. Let's listen to that again.
Professionally gathered news is a product you value.
Show that professionally gathered news is a product you value. Oh, so do these people realize how corny and awful they are? No, they don't.
And we owe you our best efforts and our highest standards.
Yes, all the rich stenographers to power in this room who constantly suck corporate dicks and suck the government dicks. Thank you for your service.
I have a ritual that began years ago when I first started on the beat, that no matter what is going on, I make a point to think.
Yeah, so we're going to stop there because the rest of it is nonsense. So anyway, I also wanted to show you Joe Biden's little kind of jokes here just for a minute because, no one else really covered it. Not that they needed to. It's non-kink. But it's worth seeing for a minute.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the puppet in chief.
If you think your Irish grandparents are wondering, my great-great-grandparents that came here in 1846 and went, what in the hell's going on? I want to thank you for the warm welcome.
I don't know what that means, but okay.
Please, not so loud. Donald was listening. Sleepy Don. I kind of like that. I may use that again. Kelly O'Donnell, president of the White House Correspondents Association.
See, I don't think that they realize that the Sleepy Joe thing sticks because he sounds sleepy. Donald Trump doesn't sound sleepy, like it or not. He doesn't sound tired like you do, Joe.
Thank you for having me. Thank you, sir. But Kelly O.
Thank you for sucking my administration's dick with such a fervor.
Let's be honest. You're way too young to be president. It's been a year since I delivered this speech, and my wife Jill, who's with me tonight, was worried how I do. I told her, don't worry. Just like riding the bike. She says, that's what I'm worried about.
What did he say? He said, it's been a year since I delivered this speech. Did he write the speech a year ago? Hold on a second. Let me back
Riding
that
the
up.
bike. She says, that's what I'm worried about. Tonight was worried how I do. Since I delivered this speech, and my wife Jill was with me. It's been a year since I delivered this speech, and my wife Jill was with me tonight, was
It's been a year since he delivered this speech.
worried how I do. I told her, don't worry.
I think he probably meant to say it's been a year since I last delivered this speech, but we'll give him a pass on that.
Just like riding the bike. She says, that's what I'm worried about. Of course, the 2024 election is in full swing. And yes, age is an issue. I'm a grown man running against a 6-year-old. Well, I feel great. I really feel great.
That's a joke that will only land with this audience because they're all sycophants who see the world that way.
I'm campaigning all over the country. Pennsylvania, Georgia, North Carolina. I've always done well in the original 13 colonies.
That's interesting.
Speaking of history, did you hear what Donald just said about the major Civil War battle? Quote, Gettysburg, wow. Trump's speech was so embarrassing, the statue of Robert E. Lee surrendered again. But look.
I would like to hear what he said before that, but okay. That's what these people do. They take out of context quotes and clips and make fun of them when there's like the whole bloodbath thing.
Age is the only thing we have in common. My vice president actually endorses me.
Yeah, woo, Pence. See, I don't think they know that we see that as a good thing. The fact that establishment, like, again, Mike Pence is a religious right guy. And what that's showing, the fact that Mike Pence doesn't like Trump, is that he's not part of the old religious right-driven Republican agenda. But, you know, these shit libs won't get it. They're just like, oh, how could you have someone like Mike Pence not like you? Ha ha ha. Mike Pence. Yay. So you get the idea. This event is for a particular audience, and that particular audience is in the room. And Russell Dobular showed the clip of Michelle Wolf calling them out for the Trump thing on Jimmy's show the other day. And he's completely right about that. They will never have someone like that there who actually attacks the press, like a Ricky Gervais. If the Biden administration had hired Ricky Gervais to host the Correspondents' Dinner, I would have high-fived them. Like, if Trump gets in, he should do that. Ricky Gervais, press correspondents dinner. I mean, Trump will get roasted too, but the press will get their just desserts. So I just want to close this out by showing you recently your boy Ken Klippenstein quit The Intercept. And there was a quote from the kind of, little piece he wrote explaining why he was quitting. Frankly, it was because they're infiltrated by corporate money and they don't tell the truth anymore. But this little poll quote here sums up the press correspondent dinner better than anything I could say, because it just kind of lays bare what these people are. And so I'm just going to read it to you. The reason so much of the news media sucks is they aren't writing for you. They're writing for their sources in Washington, for the industries they cover, for rich people, and for fancy awards committees. Just take a look at the ads they run for investment banks, defense contractors, oil companies. Unless you're in the market for any of these products, they aren't writing for you. Well said, Ken, and congratulations on your newfound independence. I love your work, and I hope you, spring up just like Aaron and Max have with Gray Zone and Matt Taibbi, because you do a lot of solid reporting, and hats off, my friend. That's a great quote. So we got two more pieces to, actually one more piece, one final piece here, and then just some funny videos to close out. But this next one's a big one. If you watch my show, my stream, you know that I am a very big advocate of the cannabis. And, it's not for everyone, but neither are a lot of things. And I think that stoners are one of the last interest groups or demographics, shall we say, that are unprotected targets, frankly. And that's about to change, I think. And so this news came out recently that the Biden administration is going to push for rescheduling of cannabis so that it is not in the same category as heroin and other harder chemical drugs. And at first I was excited about this, but then I remembered who I'm dealing with here. I'm dealing with Joe Biden, the guy who repeatedly lies about everything, the descendant of the Obama administration who perfected greenwashing, or I guess pinkwashing issues, or it's not even that, really, hyping things they are going to do that they never actually did. So a good example I'll give you that I cite a lot is the ban on insider trading. If you remember this, the Obama administration very vocally came out and said, hey, look, we passed a ban on insider trading. Well, the day of the Boston Marathon bombing, they quietly pulled that back. And so they got the press on like, look how awesome we are. And then they didn't have to actually do the thing that they got the good press for. So I think I've seen this trend continue with the Biden administration, with the student loans thing. From everything I've read, the only people that actually got their loans forgiven are people that are wealthy, which, is in line with everything Biden's done. But I wanted to go into the weeds, pun intended, on this article from the New York Times, because as usual, as with our first piece, the headline buries the actual truth of what's happening. The headline, you got to stop reading headlines because they are always misleading. And the press actually does still sometimes, provide some good information, I guess, even though it's seen through the lens of the people I just showed you in that room most of the time. So this is an article from the New York Times. And the headline reads, Justice Department recommends easing restrictions on marijuana. So when I saw this, my first thought was, oh, hey, college kids protesting genocide. Look what we're going to do for you. Now will you vote for Biden? But let's really dig into this and go into the dirty, nitty-gritty details. The move kicks off a lengthy rulemaking process. That's a red flag, and could amount to a major change in federal policy. That's optimistic. So the article is by these three people: Eileen Sullivan, Glenn Thrush, and Zolan Kano Youngs. Was published April 30th. So let's read it real quick. I'll try to get through it quick because there's a lot to take in here. The Justice Department said on Tuesday it had recommended easing restrictions on marijuana in what could amount to a major change in federal policy, even though the move, which kicks off a lengthy rulemaking process, does not end the criminalization of the drug. Let's read that again. Even though the move, which kicks off a lengthy rulemaking process, does not end the criminalization of the drug, it is a significant shift in how the government views safety and use of marijuana for medical purposes. It also reflects the Biden administration's effort to liberalize marijuana policy in a way that puts it more in line with the public, as increasingly more Americans favor legalizing the drug. So what that paragraph says to me is, how can established moneyed interests control this? We're going to try to get it. We're going to like slowly let this work its way through Congress so that all these lobbies can get their hands in it, and we can create regulations that favor them. So pharma companies can be the only legal purveyors of marijuana related drugs or whatever. It'll still be illegal, but it's like less of a criminal thing. You'll just get a fine instead of a speeding ticket, because law enforcement doesn't want to stop arresting people for it either. It feels it's a good way to like prove that they're doing something. I'm sorry. And that they're putting people, it's a good reason to put people in jail, all that stuff. But let's keep going here. And let me just enlarge this for you so you can. The decision comes at an opportune time for President Biden, who is trailing the presumptive Republican nominee, former President Donald J. Trump, as they approach the November election, according to a recent CNN poll. So give the New York Times credit here for saying the quiet part out loud, like I just did. They're obviously doing this. They're like, what can we do to like maybe win some people back? That's what they're doing. Let's keep going. People familiar with the recommendation, speaking on the condition of anonymity, said Attorney General Merrick Garland planned to tell the White House Office of Management and Budget that the government should change the drugs categorization. After the office assesses the recommendation, it will still face a long road before taking effect, including being subject to public comment. Public comment being senators and lobbies getting their hands in it. The Associated Press earlier reported the Justice Department decision. So this is also a telling line, because basically it doesn't really mean anything yet, because all it says here is Garland planned to tell the White House Office of Management and Budget that the government should change the drugs categorization. That's all that happened. Nothing else happened yet. But let's keep going. For more than half a century, marijuana has been considered a Schedule I drug classified on the same level as highly addictive substances like heroin that the Drug Enforcement Administration, who does not want this to change, describes as having no currently accepted medical use. Moving marijuana to Schedule III, as the Department of Health and Human Services recommended in August, would put it alongside less addictive substances like Tylenol with codeine, ketamine, and testosterone, meaning that it would be subject to fewer restrictions on production and research, and that eventually it could be prescribed by a doctor. So I think the medical cannabis lobby, when you talk about the money in the cannabis world, they're the first people that got their foot in the door. So they have the most money and they have organized political lobby. So watch this space from that perspective, because like with anything, public comment means the lobbies who, work senators in Washington are the ones that are going to have a say in how the deregulation happens, basically. For more than half a century, marijuana has been, okay, so we already got that. Next part of this, the recommendation came despite concerns from Ann Milgram, the administrator of the DEA, of course. They're going to fight this because, hey, we want to put people in jail for this, which has long relied on federal research and data to support these decisions, according to a law enforcement official familiar with the matter. Interesting source. To keep going. Administration officials have privately acknowledged the political benefit of easing marijuana restrictions. Again, this is why you have to read the article. And props to the New York Times. This is actually a good article. It could energize younger voters dissatisfied with the White House and please criminal justice advocates who have pressed Mr. Biden to overhaul the nation's drug policy. It's very rare you will hear me say props to the New York Times, to be honest. While Mr. Biden has been slow to embrace such a change, he has for years said that designating marijuana on the same level as heroin or LSD made little sense. Let me read that again. While Mr. Biden has been slow to embrace such a change, he has for years said that designating marijuana on the same level as heroin or LSD made little sense because he works for the police lobby. He hinted during his State of the Union address in March that the change could soon be coming. About a week later, VP Kamala Harris said that the DEA must reassess marijuana as quickly as possible. So, one of the rare occasions you'll hear me give props to Kamala Harris. Support for easing marijuana restrictions has grown over the years, shifting from a point of focus among the left flank of the Democratic Party to becoming a more bipartisan issue. A Gallup poll from November found that 70% of Americans believed marijuana use should be legal, an increase from 50% in 2013. Still, the decision will do little to alter the current landscape, with the most immediate impact on the cannabis industry itself. That is a clutch line right there. That should be the headline. Don't you think? Or at least the subheadline. Imagine this headline: Biden administration's decision will do to decriminalize marijuana. This is the headline. Envision this. Accurate headlines in the New York Times. Biden administration's decision to decriminalize marijuana will have little effect on anyone but the cannabis industry. That would be the headline. Let me say that again. Biden administration decision to decriminalize marijuana will have little effect on anyone but the cannabis industry. That would be the correct headline for this article, if it were honest. A lot of people are going to be disappointed, probably, a bit surprised about how very little changes, said Paul Armanado, a deputy director of the advocacy group NORML, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. I trust that guy more than anyone else quoted in this article, because that organization has been at this for a long time, and he's going to be honest with you about the real, the aspects of this law that are actually going to affect you, because they are one of the few lobbies for cannabis that, has been around for a very long time. To keep going, already 38 states, the District of Columbia, and 3 territories have approved its use for medical reasons. Many of those places have also approved it for recreational use. But the DEA's move does not make state laws on using medical marijuana compliant with the federal law. And for states that have not approved the use of marijuana for medicinal or recreational purposes, downgrading the drug would not automatically change state and local criminal statutes. The bigger shift, many say, is cultural. So despite the more than majority of the country wanting this policy as soon as possible, it's still not going to happen because we are not a democracy. The DEA, the cannabis industry itself, I'm sure probably the medical people, like I was saying, they have a lot of money. And the, law enforcement that wants to jail people for it, the pharmaceutical industry, I'm sure, does not want this to happen because it's going to cut into their profit share. Or they're going to try to find a way to control the sale of it if it becomes a medical thing, But let's keep going. It is a strong signal that the war on drugs and the crimes that are associated with the war on drugs should continue to be reevaluated and should continue to be reformed and changed, said Ed Chung, the vice president of initiatives at the nonprofit Vera Institute of Justice, which focuses on criminal justice reform. There's a huge messaging aspect to that. So it's more about messaging than anything. The cannabis industry stands to benefit the most from the recommended change, which would ensure that state licensed businesses are eligible for a steep tax cut, possibly leading to lower prices for consumers. So that's good, I guess. Lower prices for consumers. Let's keep going, though. Sorry, I should have enlarged that. My bad. It is a strong signal that the war on drugs and the crimes that are associated with the war on drugs should continue to be reevaluated and should continue to be reformed and changed. Oh, sorry, I just read that. I crushed these two slides together. So anyway, this tax relief, we left off with, let me start over here, possibly leading to lower prices for consumers. So this tax relief is estimated to free up millions of dollars for companies to put toward things like hiring, expansion, and product development, all of which could be a boon to local economies. Under tax law, businesses related to controlled substances that are classified in the top two tiers are deemed ineligible for most credits or reductions. So So it's really like a tax filing thing. Is that what they're saying? Categorizing marijuana as a Schedule III drug removes such restrictions, allowing plant-touching businesses like cultivators, processors, and retailers to claim common deductions for expenses like rent, payroll, and marketing. It is not yet clear how rescheduling would affect the business's access to financial services or the lack thereof. So it doesn't even help with that. Currently, many cannabis businesses are forced to operate in cash only because most banks do not want to risk handling cash made from selling an illegal substance under federal law. Doing so is considered money laundering. Kevin Sabet, who'd served as a drug policy advisor during the Obama, Bush, and Clinton administrations, said the data did not exist to support rescheduling marijuana. Now, this guy worked for the Clinton and Obama administrations, and he's against it. Politics and industry influence have loomed over this discussion from the very beginning, said Mr. Sabet, now the president of the group Smart Approaches to Marijuana, which focuses on aligning marijuana policy with scientific research. A fucking grassroots AstroTurf group, I'm sure. Probably funded by Pharma or something like that. I'm going to have to look into that. That's interesting. Smart Approaches to Marijuana. We'll follow up on that. The federal government last considered rescheduling marijuana at the end of the Obama administration. Ultimately, the DEA declined to do so based on a recommendation from the Department of Health and Human Services. At the time, officials cited federal health experts' assessments that marijuana has a high potential for abuse, has no accepted medical use in the United States, and lacks an acceptable level of safety for use, even under medical supervision. How ridiculous are these people? I mean, anyone who lives in today's world, it can clearly see that's bullshit. And you have to wonder who's paying for that bullshit to exist, because you know someone is. But in the past decade, more states have moved to decriminalize small amounts of marijuana and make it available for medical use, despite these Fox dipshits. And the industry has pressured the federal government to revisit that 2016 decision. During his so there it is, the industry, the lobbyists are pushing for this. During his 2020 campaign, Mr. Biden vowed to decriminalize cannabis and erase convictions over its use, and as president has moved toward that. Notice he didn't do it in his first term, so he's going to try to use it again to get reelected, I'm sure. Issuing pardons and commutations over nonviolent drug offenses. So he did issue some pardons, maybe. So did Trump. It is a shift for a president who has not supported legalizing marijuana and who, as a senator, championed aggressive drug laws, including the 1994 crime bill that led to mass incarceration. Thank you, New York Times, for including that. Let's read that again. A rare moment of truth in the New York Times. Joe Biden, as a senator, championed aggressive drug laws, including the 1994 crime bill that led to mass incarceration. Good job, New York Times. In October 2022, Mr. Biden pressed his administration to quickly review the classification of the drug. Less than a year later, the Department of Health and Human Services recommended that marijuana be reclassified from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. The decision was leaked, giving the public an unusual look into the agency's findings. Health officials found that while regular use of marijuana did create dependence on the drug, the likelihood of serious outcomes is low. Interesting that he pressed the administration to review the classification in October 2022. My bad. I was going to make a conspiracy theory, but I'll just skip that part. So anyway, as per usual, the devil's in the details when it comes to these types of things. the recriminalization or the decriminalization, it should be called the recriminalization, the decriminalization of marijuana thing, the headline itself is a campaign tactic, clearly, and I'll believe it when I see it. That's the attitude I take with these kind of things. Not that they might not do it, they might follow through, but the language in that is already telling you what the deal is. They're like, well, we have to consider it, and this agency has to think about it. Like the cops have to think about it. Give the cops time to think about whether or not they should still arrest people for smoking pot, guys. Come on. They get a lot of money from the federal budget for that. We live in a gigantic circle jerk. And with that ends the stream. We're at 2 hours. And I like to end with something funny, but this time it's actually also something salient. And this guy, I've seen a couple of his little things. So this guy is called like Date Right Guy, I think. He's big on TikTok, but he just like makes these stupid little points, like while he's on a date, supposedly, like he's about to eat his dinner, like take a drink of a soda or something like that. And it's brilliant. And another reason why TikTok has to go, you'll see here, because it's just an average guy making some great points that go viral real quick. And the ability for an average person to instantly gain an audience just by speaking the truth or saying their opinion about something is a threat, not only to the government, the powers of control, but also to the people at that White House press correspondents dinner. They're already, she's out here recommending you subscribe for the good of humanity to bullshit stenographers to power for a reason, because they're deteriorating, they're falling apart, and rightfully so, because they serve no value. As you can see, if they did, they wouldn't all be sitting at dinner sucking each other's dicks with the politicians. These are the people who cover the White House, who cover, they're having drinks together and dinner together and laughing it up together. They should have an adversarial relationship. And Matt Taibbi is one of the people who's touched on this so many times, but the press used to be not of the upper class. They weren't Anderson Cooper. They were the average blue collar working guy looking for gumshoe, looking for leads and stuff. And so this type of thing, this type of TikTok shit is a threat to them. So thank you for tuning in. If you did, hopefully you gleaned some valuable information. This was a very article heavy episode, but I like that. And it was therapeutic for me to go into the weeds on a couple of these things, specifically that whole thing about Soros funding protests. Like, what a ridiculous, like, it's just mind blowing to me that conservatives who 5 minutes ago could see how clearly the media was full of shit are now like, oh, this is all true. Everything they say about these protests, Soros is funding it. Again, gigantic circle jerk, guys. Come on. Get out of your cult mentality and view things with a critical eye. Even if they speak to your cult nature, even if they appeal to you. And we're going to end with these clips from your homie, Date Right Guy. Just 2 quickies. Very great salient points. And we'll see you next time. Thank you again. I got mad love for y'all, and let's get this rocking.
Senators talk about the bill to ban TikTok. They say, you peasants, you don't understand. We've been given classified briefings by the intelligence community. The same intelligence community that told us there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq? Okay. There was that active shooter in Uvalde, and the Texas police stood around and did nothing while kids were being murdered. I wish somebody had told them that the shooter said mean things about Israel